Hi, Kylan. Hey, I've got your paper here, and I just finished reading it. I've put some marks and comments on the paper, so what I'll do is I'll also save the paper and email it back to you so you have the actual draft. And then I would suggest, if you have any questions, that you use that draft and, you know, ask me your questions and collaborate if we need to do that. All right. So overall, I think you're doing a great job. I know you feel very worried about the paper, but I think you're doing very well. I like the evidence that you're providing. I think you do show that mental illnesses are difficult to diagnose and that there is a stigma associated with them. But your paper's a little short, and you didn't tell me what your plan is for lengthening it. So I will give you some of my ideas. But if you already have an idea, then just stick with your plan. All right. So your APA formatting looks great. The only thing is remember that you don't need my name. So let me see if I can get back up here and get rid of that. And you don't need the date. All right. So those things we would want to get rid of. And then don't forget to get rid of the word draft when you submit this for a final. Those are little things that we often do. So I would rather see you just fix your title now and then just stick with it. So I'm going to put that in yellow so you don't forget that. All right. So you need to be using paragraph indents here. And I don't know if that happened because I had to copy your paper and put it into Word so I could work with it. I'm not really sure if you had them before. I'm not really sure. But don't forget, excuse me, you need this. Okay. Now, there's another thing I'm noticing in your paper, and this also might have happened when I downloaded your paper. It downloads into Office Libre, and I don't like that. So I copy and paste it into Word. And so when I do that, sometimes Word changes the formatting. One thing I'm noticing is that you have these extra spaces here. And if we go down and look between some paragraphs and some quotes, we'll see them there too, like here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fix that for you and show you how to do that. So I'm going to go right up here to the very beginning of your paper. I'm going to highlight the whole paper. Then I'm going to go into here, which is the little paragraph tab, and I'm going to go down here and set these both at 0. Excuse me. I'm going to put a check mark there, don't add spaces, and I'm going to go to double, which is what we want, and then that'll fix your whole paper. Oops, sorry. So now you can see that those spaces are gone. Okay, it looks really big because I have it enlarged down here so that we can talk about it. My eyes are really tired because I've been looking at a screen now, and I think you probably understand just all day long, every day. So it's my eyes are just getting tired. Okay, so you start off with your definition, and I have one question. I'm thinking that if this is the beginning of a sentence, then this M should be capitalized. So this seems odd to me. So you double check your quote, and if it does begin with mental illness, then just capitalize that M so that I know there isn't something that was left out here. Okay, so the May Clinic, and shouldn't that be Mayo Clinic? So I'm going to highlight that in yellow because I think you mean Mayo Clinic, but I could be wrong. Maybe there's another clinic and it's a May Clinic. I don't know. But okay, so you're getting this from a website. So then that indicates to me that there should be no page number here. So that's why you don't have a parenthetical citation. But one thing that APA always does require is the year. So if you think about the APA parenthetical citation, it goes author, if you know the author, comma, then it goes year, comma, page, and then the page number, if there is a page number, and then a period. Okay, so you may not have an author. Well, you do. The Mayo Clinic is your author, and you may not have a page number, but you should have a year. So in all cases, you should be able to come up with a parenthetical citation. Okay, so that is the information that we would want to put inside of one of those. Okay. So you're doing fine. I think the content is good. In fact, most of my comments on your paper really have to do with grammar and just typos and your citations. Okay, so let's just quickly go through them. This is a thing that a lot of people do. And there are two different kinds of nouns: mass nouns and count nouns. So count noun is a noun that can be counted. One person, two persons, three persons, that kind of stuff. Mass nouns are nouns that can't be. You can't say one audience, two audience, one furniture, two furniture, one sugar. You could say sugar, but it has to be a lump of sugar. So those nouns that are mass nouns, then you use the word amount. It's a large amount of sugar. A large amount, this amount of furniture won't fit in my living room, okay? But when you've got a count noun, you have to use the word number here, okay? So number of people. All right, so that is how you would refer to any kind of a count noun. So a lot of times, in fact, most of the time, you're going to want to use the word number instead of amount. All right, so I'm going to just leave that little yellow so you can kind of focus, and I'm going to underline number for you. Okay, so this is just wordy. More strategies and methods need to be developed to identify and treat symptoms related to mental health. So first, I don't know if you looked in the revision unit and looked at the style check, but whenever you see all of these prepositions, it's it's an indication that maybe this sentence could be rewritten. So do you mean strategies and methods? Why can't we just say methods here? More methods need to be developed because you want to come up with diagnoses, right? So that indicates to me that that's a method. So more methods need to be developed to, and do you mean identify and treat symptoms related to mental health? Or are we already doing a good job of identifying them? We just need to figure out how to treat them. So I'm not really sure, but that just seemed really wordy to me. And then here, this was a squiggly blue line that was in your paper. And let me just show you what it looked like. Let me just get rid of that. And let me get rid of this. I just had to highlight it so I didn't forget to talk about it. See this squiggly line? That was already in your paper. So if you right-click on it, it gives you choices for correcting it. So because the computer doesn't know if you mean singular or plural, it gives you both options. But what you notice that this is criterion. That's the singular form of the word. Criteria is the plural form. And so I'm thinking that you want criteria, these criteria. More focus needs to be put on these criteria right up here because we are losing people to suicide, and even that should be an in there, homicide, because the proper steps were not taken to help people suffering from some of the symptoms that poor mental health can bring about. Okay, So when you see the little blue squiggly line, right click on that and try to get it fixed. Okay, so you can't improve a symptom, but you can treat it. So you need a different word here than improve. And I know that sometimes that's really hard because, we're writing and our brains just are getting tired and we can't really think of the word we want. But what you really want here is treat. Okay, and so all of that's good. This arrow is just to remind you to use an indent here for your paragraph. Excuse me. And this arrow got moved somewhere and it does not belong there. So I'm going to just move it down here. So paragraph indent is what I'm thinking you want there, because this is a very long paragraph, which is fine, but I don't think it wants to go on for 2 pages. That would be a very long introduction. So based on numerous amounts of research and studies being done, okay, so we want to or that have already been done thus far, there is evidence that strongly suggests that our mental health care system is far less effective than our physical healthcare system in giving a proper diagnosis. All right, so this sounds to me like it's your thesis statement, but I'm not sure. So now I'm going back up here. If a person has a physical health issue, drastic measures are taken, blah, blah, blah. While mental illness can be hard to diagnose and manage, they should be treated like they are just as important. So I'm thinking that you mean this to be your thesis statement, so I'm going to see this as your first point. So the mental health care system is less effective than our physical health care system. All right. So, oh yes, this was down here. I wanted to tell you that you're doing an excellent job of introducing your sources. And this was a great source to introduce because it's from Psychology Today. It's a very reputable uh, magazine or journal for this topic. Okay, so and then you're doing fine. You've got your quote here that looks great, and then you're trying to explain it here, which is great. And then I crossed this out because obviously you're referencing this article, so it's just wordiness. So I just capitalized your H there. He goes on to discuss how the diagnoses are known to overlap, and brain imaging has found proof of this through circuits. So you need a comma there because this is a complete sentence and this is a complete sentence, and so you've got to have a comma there. And then since this is a complete sentence, you have to have a colon here, not a comma. Okay, so I'm going to change the colors on those so that you don't forget to go back. So if you are going to use a complete sentence to set up a direct quote, then a colon has to be there, not a comma. Otherwise, you've created a comma splice. Okay, and then here you've got 3 items in actually more than 3. Depression and anxiety, comma, bipolar, comma, and ADHD. So don't forget about if you have 3 or more items in a list, they all need to be set off with commas. All right, now I'm going to scroll to the end of your paper because you had asked me about what to do with this last little bit. And I think that this evidence here really relates to the paragraph that we were just in. The American Psychiatric Association developed a formal classification of symptoms, which has been very helpful for psychiatrists. But this system has highlighted 2 major problems. And so the variable number of symptoms, and they overlap. And so this seems to me like this is something that you were discussing right up here. So I'm thinking that, where did he go? Right in here somewhere you need to pull that information up because it's really the same as what you're talking about here. Because you say Many of the different psychiatric diagnoses are complex and have interlocking systems. This can oftentimes make getting the correct diagnosis difficult. So you could maybe right after this sentence here introduce your other guy that's down below and bring in that information. Now, yes, it's going to make this paragraph long, but I think that's okay. All right, so you need a paragraph there. Remember, there's never the word that before a direct quote, okay? So it is said globally, more than 70% of people receive more, and this is just to remind you that you have the site Ask Taryn. Okay, so I want to point out that you're actually doing something here incorrectly. So do you see how you have your quotation marks here? All right, well, they don't belong there, okay? So I'm going to remove them for you. What belongs here is a period. Let me turn off my, okay. All right, so that's what goes there. Now, since you don't have the name of this source anywhere, then what should be in here is, let's go back to what I said earlier, remember, author, oops, if you have an author, comma, year, and then page. Okay, so that's what goes in here. And then this comma here goes away, and then this, I'm going to turn it to black so that it looks normal, okay? That is correct. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the color of this highlight so you can remember that this is the correct one. All right, so that's what you want in there. So if you have no author, then you're going to use some words of the title. So let me just do that here. You don't have to put the whole title, just enough words of the title to distinguish it from every other title that's listed on your reference page. Okay? So I hope that answers the question that you had there. All right. Mental illness. Now, if you don't know who said that, let's say globally more than 70% of blah, 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 you just heard it somewhere, but you can't remember where, and you can't, then just footnote it and explain at the bottom of the page in your footnote that you don't know where this came from. Okay. All right, so you've done a good job introducing this source. I love that you're doing that. Whenever you have the article states, because this is not a complete sentence, you cannot put a semicolon there. So you want a comma there. All right, so again, I think I have answered your questions about citation, but this one, of course, as you know, is incorrect. This is saying that if we reduce the stigma, and I like that you're going back in there and grabbing, you know, some of the content of that quote and explaining it down here for your readers. Make sure that you always address whatever was most significant in your quote in your explanation after the quote. And I think you're doing a pretty good job of that. Here you need a comma, angry, comma, violent, comma, and unpredictable. This has led to high level of discrimination. I don't know, that doesn't make sense to me, so you need to go and fix it. Here you would need a colon instead of a semicolon, because for one thing, the colon is what we use before direct quotes. If what comes before the colon is a complete sentence. The article continues on to address the stigma associated with substance abuse. It is a complete sentence, so you need to make that correction. Also, remember when we block a quote, which I'm thinking that this quote really doesn't need to be blocked. I don't know if it's 40 words or not. Let's see if I can get word count. Words 41. Okay, so you're okay. But we want to get rid of those quotation marks, because remember, that's why we're blocking, is to show that this is a direct quote. So you don't need to do that. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of the yellow now, and I'm going to put it in blue so that you know this is correct. Okay. And I'll just do this. Okay, and your period is in the right place. And at the very least, we want to have a page number if all of this information is coming from this article up here, okay? So, and a year for sure. So maybe I better put in there year, comma, page. Okay, oops, comma. All right. And this is another one of those blue squiggly lines that was in your paper, and I'm kind of glad that it's here, because if an individual feels as though they are being, okay, so it marked it, and then it gives you this wrong response, individual feel. So you were right to ignore it, because it's, I don't know why it gave you that as an option, but it's clearly wrong. So if an individual feels as though they are being discriminated against at the hands of someone else, comma, that's good, especially a doctor or nurse, they make be, and so this is the one you need to fix right there. So let's go up there and highlight that. They may be reluctant to seek help. Okay, so this is to show you that you need a paragraph indentation. I hope those things aren't going to move around when I when I save this draft. Okay, so here this is another thing that excuse me, that gets people tripped up. When do you use I and when do you use me? Well, you use I if it's a subject. You use me if it's an object, but that probably doesn't help a lot of people. So do it like this. Say, the stigma around mental health care does not only affect individuals like I. Well, that doesn't sound right, does it? You don't say it affects I, you say it affects me, right? So get rid of the you and then just read the sentence with whatever word it is supposed to be here. So what we want here is me, you and me. So there are times when me is correct. I think sometimes people just use I every time, thinking that they're fixing the problem, but they're not. So here you want to say individuals like you and me, okay? An individual like me. You wouldn't say an individual like I. All right. All right, suffering in silence, written by, I don't know why I did that. I don't know. I can't see that there's anything wrong with that. All right. Again, here we need to have a semicolon instead of a colon instead of a semicolon, okay? So whenever you're setting up a quote, remember, if what comes before it is a complete sentence, this has to be a colon, all right? Okay, so here's another squiggly line. So if we right click on it, it does correct the problem, which was that you had 2 periods there, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and fix that for you. Or actually, I'll just leave it so you can practice on that. Okay, so I did put a comment in. I didn't give you very many comments on the sidebar here because I knew I was going to do this video, but I just did write this down for you so that you could, to try to, remind you that I answered your question. Okay, so they believe that if they talk about their mental illness, that it will negatively, all right, so we need a comma here. If they talk about their mental illness, comma, okay, so we want comma there, that it will negatively affect their advancement in their schooling and throughout their careers. And we don't want a comma there because this is just 2 items in a list, schooling and career. So you got your commas there mixed up. So this one you have to have because it's coming at the end of a dependent clause, and this one you don't want to have because it's just 2 items in a list. Also, if you've got the 2 that's here, they believe that if they talk about their mental illness, we don't need this that there, okay? It will negatively, so you've repeated the that's. So now if you like this one better, then get rid of that one. So you can decide that, but you only need 1 that in this particular sentence, okay? Okay, so I believe that this is supposed to be up here. Oh, no, I think this is, we need a paragraph indent right there. So as you can see, I'm just correcting, your commas need to go inside your quotation marks. These commas need to go away. That should be a colon. This should be a comma. So these are just corrections here in your punctuation. All right. So then you get kind of to your final point here, which is that everyone's brains are wired differently. And I'm not so sure that this is really helping your argument, because it makes it sound as if making a diagnosis is going to be impossible because genetically we're all different. So I think you should rethink this idea. Now, one thing that you do say here is and I put a quote over a comment here, that you make an excellent point about environment. And I know that mental health disorders are physical. They are sometimes genetic, they are physical, they can be found physically in the brain. But I wonder what environment has to do with these symptoms, and how does it ultimately change? For example, in epigenetics, they have found that people that have gone through horribly traumatic events, like say the Holocaust, that ultimately their children's genetics can be changed by that event. So we know that, living a traumatic childhood is going to change one's brain chemistry. And so I just wondered if, because you need another couple of pages, your essay's a little bit short. Um, so I was wondering if you wanted to talk about trauma and environment, and how that might also contribute to the fact that diagnosing these disorders are so difficult, because people respond differently to trauma. I mean, I don't know. I could be taking you down the wrong path, and you may already have ideas for lengthening your paper, which would be great. So the only actual big thing that I'm suggesting is that you move this information up to where you were talking about the same topic. But other than that, all the rest of the comments really have to do with grammar, which is what you see here, and citation. And the missing paragraph indentations are also grammar. Now, since you are doing an APA paper, another thing you might want to consider putting into your paper would be heads. So up here, you don't want to have introduction because you already have the title of your paper. That's one head. But down here, when you change topics, I don't know, maybe you should say diagnosing mental illnesses as your head here, or the ineffectiveness of diagnoses, or something as a head here. Does that make any sense? So, oops, and now it's going to be a problem, because if I put the head in here, and why it changed back to this strange font style, I have no idea. But anyway, so let's say we're going to have that as a head. But now, do you see what happens? See how it pushes your paragraph down? So what I've got to do now is I've got to do a page break here to make sure that this stays with this paragraph. Okay, so I would suggest, because this is an APA thing, that you think of coming up with some heads here. And then if you have subsections of, like say you're still talking about diagnoses, then you would put those heads over here against this margin. Okay, but you don't have to have subheads, but the APA paper does want to have these heads. And if you think back to your proposal, we did a similar thing there. All right. Well, I think that is pretty much it. I'm sorry for the length of this video, but it is really hard to just go really quickly and give you guys good advice.